Welcome back. We're in lesson 31 and we're going to talk about equations with parentheses. When equations contain parentheses, we begin by eliminating the parentheses. If the parentheses are preceded by a number, we use the distributive property. We multiply the number by every term inside the parentheses and then discard the parentheses. So let's begin with example 31.1. We have this to solve. If you'll write it down as I write it, then we can solve it together. 2 times 3 minus b equals b minus 5. All right, so first we're going to use our distributive property. So 2 times 3 and then 2 times negative b. So that's 6. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times negative b is negative 2b. And that equals b minus 5. We just bring that straight down. Now we can swim our fish from one side to the other. Remember, whatever we did on one side, we have to do the other. So we are going to add, actually we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. Then we're going to subtract b from both sides. Okay, so these cancel. That'd be 0. That'd be 0. So now we have, remember you have a 1 in front of your variable whenever there's not one there. So negative 2 and negative 1 is negative 3b equals negative 5, and negative 6 is going to be negative 11. So now we're going to divide both sides by negative 3. b is equal to 11 over 3. All right, let's do another one. 31.2. And here's the problem. All right, remember that we only distribute to what is in the parentheses. So 3 times 1, that's 3. 3 times 2x, that's a positive 6x. And 7 is not in the parentheses, so we bring it straight down. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times positive 2 is going to be negative 8. Right, so now we can squish our like terms together. So 3 and 7 is 10. And then we have our 6x. And we bring down our negative 4x minus 8. Now, and in order to get this, I did the negative 4 times x and negative 4 times positive 2. So now we can swim fish from one side to the other. So we're going to add 4x to both sides. That cancels. We're going to subtract 10 from both sides. And that cancels. And that leaves us with 10x equals negative 18. I'm going to divide both sides by 10. That leaves x equals, and because these are both even numbers, we can reduce them. We can reduce them by 2. Negative 18 reduces to negative 9, and 10 reduces to 5. All right, let's look at the steps that we did. First we eliminated the parenthesis on both sides. So that's step number 1. Eliminate parenthesis. Okay, step number 2, we added any like terms and we eliminated the parentheses by using the distributive property. So we distributed, okay? Number 2, we add like terms. So we did the squish. That's what I call the squish. So the squish is add like terms. Okay, and then finally we swim fish. And what that does, it consolidates the x. I'm just going to write it easier. We put the x on one side, x equals whatever the number is. Okay, we put the variable x on one side and the number on the other side. Then we divide to solve. All right, and the last and final step, which you may or may not always do, is to reduce if possible. All right, and that's what we do. Those are our 5 steps to solving a problem like this. All right, so let's do 31.3. Pause and write down your steps if you need to. All right, here's our problem. So step 1, we need to eliminate the parenthesis using distribution, or the distributive property. So 15 times 4 is 60. 15 times 5 is, it's a negative 5, so it's negative 75x. Bring down our equal sign. 16 times 4 is 64. And 16 times negative 6 is negative 96x. And then we bring down our extra constant. Okay, so this is the original equation. This is where we use the distributive property, and sometimes it helps to write down your steps on the outside. So we have the original equation here. Okay. If you'll write this down as I do it, then it'll be a whole lot easier. Used distributive property. All right, next step, we are going to add like terms. So 60 minus 75x equals 74 minus 96x. All right, so we added like terms. Okay. Now we are going to swim our fish, and we're going to move 96. We're going to get rid of 96x from this side. And in order to do that, we have to add it, because that's the opposite of the sign here. And because it's an equation, we have to do the same thing to both sides to keep the equation true. Okay, so this becomes 0. It cancels out. And now we can, let's see, added 96x to both sides. All right, so this is going to be 60, and this is going to be plus 21x. Equals, we'll bring our 74 down. Now we need to move this 6, get rid of it from this side, so we're going to subtract 6. And we're going to do that from both sides, so we subtracted 6 from both sides. Okay, And that leaves us with this canceling out. 21x equals, oh, I'm sorry. That should be, I was going to say, that doesn't look right. 60. So minus 60. We subtracted 60 from both sides. That makes more sense now. I'm going to say. All right, so if we subtract 60 from both sides, then we are left with 14 right here. So now if we divide both sides by 21, right, divide both by 20, 21, that gives us these cancel. X is equal to 14 over 21, which can be reduced by 7 to 2 over 3. So we reduced by 7. All right. And those are the steps. If you write your steps down as we work these problems, then you will understand the process a little bit better, and you will start to see what's going to happen before you have to do it. You'll start to see it in your mind, and writing it down just cements what you're doing. It's like working the problem twice without having to work the problem twice. And we know that repetition builds the skill. Whatever it is, when you practice, you get better. Math is the same way. When you practice the problem, you get better at it. So let's clear the page and do 31.4. Write it as I write it. All right, what is our first step? This is the original. Okay, so what's our first step? Our first step is to distribute. All right. Miss Tracy, there's nothing in front of the parenthesis to distribute. Yes, there is. There's always an invisible one in front of a parenthesis. And you can do that to both sides. Always. Bring down our 12. Negative 1 times 2x makes negative 2x. Negative 1 times positive 5 makes a negative 5. Negative 2, bring it down. Positive 1 times x equals a positive x. And you could put a 1 there if you want to, but we know there's a 1. It's assumed. Positive 1 times negative 3 remains a negative 3. Okay, so we distributed. Now we're going to do our squish, which is the same thing as adding like terms. So this becomes negative 2x plus 7, and this becomes negative 5 plus x. All right, I'm going to drop that 1 in there just for the sake of easier math. So now we're going to swim, and that means swim this little fish to this side and this little fish to this side. And we're going to do that by adding 2x to both sides and subtracting, no, we're going to add 5 to both sides because I've got my x's over here now. That canceled. So we're going to add 5 to both sides. And notice how I'm doing it all on the same line, so I'm saving space on my paper. Now I could just draw my line, and I know that 12 is equal to 3x, and I did it all a little bit shorter, a little bit less area, okay? So now I can divide. That's going to be this step here. Divide. And I'm going to divide both sides by 3 because 3 times some number gives us 12. So to work backwards, I have to divide 12 by 3 in order to find out what this number is. And when I do that, I find out that this number is x. And we have solved it. I'm sorry, did I say this number is x? This number is 4. X is 4. I do that sometimes when I write it backwards. Usually I put the x on this side, but you could put it on either side. It will be, as long as you do it the right way, it doesn't matter. As long as you do the math correctly, it does not matter. All right, so original, distribute, squish, swim, divide, solve. So all we have is D, S, S, D, S. All right, let's try one more. 31.5. Copy down the problem as I write it. Here we go. So this is the original. Okay. Now we're going to distribute. So let's put our ones in. All right. So now negative 1 times this is negative 4y. Negative 1 times this is positive 17. Positive 1, that doesn't change it at all. This doesn't change. This does change. Negative times negative is a positive. All right. So now we're going to squish is the next step. Actually, we distributed here. All right, we distributed. Now we're going to squish. So it's going to be 17 and a negative 5y, because when you have a negative variable all by itself, there's always a 1 right in there. There's always a factor of 1. All right, equals 3y minus 1, because again, we have a 1 right there. All right, so now let's see what we can do. Now we can swim our fish from one side to the other. So let's swim him over. And let's swim him over. That leaves negative 8y on this side equals negative 18 on this side. When we divide both sides by negative 8, we get y is equal to 18 over 8, which is going to be 2 and 2/8, which is going to be 2 1/4. Let me double check my answer. And that is correct. You could also leave it as 9 over 4, which is just as correct. So we divided, then we solved and reduced. And there we go. Those are our steps. And that is all we have for lesson 31. If you would like to read the lesson for yourself, you can go to the material section of this class and you can read the lesson as written there.